I'd like to just say a few words also about third generation biofuels. That's biofuels that are based on algae and synthetic biology. And genetic modification is having an awful lot to do with that. But the claims are being made that algal biofuels will provide us with a biofuel that doesn't compete directly with our food supply, and therefore will in fact fulfill the green promises made originally by the bioenergy companies. This is not very credible at all. There are no successful large-scale productions of third-generation biofuels. Shell and DuPont have both pulled out because they cannot produce in viable quantities an algal biofuel. But it doesn't mean that they're not that other companies are not trying. Companies like Syngenta are trying, and they're trying to create an organism that has a metabolic pathway that will consume other matter and excrete an oil that can be used as a biofuel. Now, there are problems associated with sterile containment and protection of the workforce, and etc., in relation to these algal biofuels. But one of the major problems that we predict, should they ever go up in scale, is that they're talking about microorganisms, microalgal organisms, and these can quite likely escape into the natural world. And if they do, we just have not got the slightest idea of the consequences that they can bring about. But one thing we're certain about, which has been proven with the microplastic beads that are being used as for cleaning products and other purposes, exfoliants in care products, etc., is that they have gone through our refuse systems, etc., and gone into the water courses, and they have been ingested by organisms at the lower ends of the food chain. And through this, these bees are so small that they pass through the entire food chain and end up in our meat again on our plates. So the microorganisms that they're talking about developing for algal biofuels will actually supply a food source for the primary producers in our food chain, the base level, and will be consumed by bigger and bigger animals, and will end up in our food inevitably also. But the consequences that they will create on the way are unimaginable. We have no idea. We do not know what these plastic microbeads are doing to the ecosystem at the moment, but we do know that they are creating harm. They've been found in the tiniest of organisms. So genetically modified algae at a micro level, we've no idea what that could do. It could cause algal blooms, which uses up the oxygen in water supplies. It cuts out light, so photosynthesis can't occur, etc. Now, one of the worries in an otherwise very admirable report, which was the IPCC annual assessment number 5 report, which was published last year, has some very worrying suggestions that we may require engineering silver bullets to save us from global warming, or to save us from food shortages and all the other threats that currently face mankind at the moment. And the worry is that they do leave the door open for biofuel and consequently genetically modified organism creations of biofuel. Also, they talk about bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. You should be aware that there is no successful application of carbon capture and storage in the world yet, despite what the government say, despite what the British government says, it is giving Drax several hundred million to build a new power station on site at Selby in North Yorkshire. And it says that they will build no new power stations without carbon capture and storage. But carbon capture and storage has not actually succeeded anywhere, and the USA have pulled out of it. They're not going to be investing in any more carbon capture and storage. And Vattenfall, the giant German energy company, have also pulled out of carbon capture and storage. So when the British government when Mr. Cameron from across the road says that no new power station will be built without carbon capture and storage, what he's actually saying is that no new power station will be built without a huge, to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds of our money being given to the coal companies to research carbon capture and storage and come back to us with their findings. It's a barefaced lie. Now, I mentioned this because I was mentioning the IPCC report that was published last year, and there are very worrying references in that report to BECCS, to the possibility that we may require large-scale geoengineering and genetically engineered as well as geoengineered solutions to climate change, because the threat is so great. They did an exemplary job in outlining the threat. The fear is just in the way that they posit the reaction we will have to make should the threat become absolutely critical, and that is those engineering silver bullets. The USA and Russia have both expressed, Russia especially, have criticized the precautionary principle, and Linda earlier mentioned that in the USA they prefer what they call the scientific principle, where harm must be proven, to the precautionary principle, where safety must be guaranteed. It is very worrying. Already, Brazil, who is a signatory to the precautionary principle enshrined in the Convention on Biodiversity, they threatened to introduce genetically modified eucalyptus trees into the wild in Brazil. Now, can you imagine if the genetically modified trees were to spread into the Amazon rainforest? We have no idea what the outcomes of such a disastrous event would bring about. But through lobbying, there was a successful moratorium put on the introduction of genetically modified trees into the Brazilian wilderness. We don't know how long this moratorium is going to last, and it was public pressure that brought it about. But the fact that we must remember is that Brazil was prepared to go ahead and do this unilaterally in the most biodiverse, sensitive part of planet Earth. So I say that we must protect the precautionary principle at all costs. Thank you. If you're interested in finding out more and want to keep up to date about the threats through bioenergy to our food supply and to biodiversity in the world, please look up biofuelwatch.org.uk.